Welcome everyone. Today we're going to do a tutorial for the Double Crazy Cube by MF8. This is one of the more difficult mass-produced puzzles out there. For some reason, I find it especially easy to make mistakes while solving it, so remember to be patient with yourself. Today we're just going to look at the default configuration for this puzzle. That's where the white and yellow faces are set so that all the centers move with the outer pieces. The red and orange faces are set so that the outer centers move with the outer pieces and the inner centers stay stationary. And the blue and green faces are set so that all the center pieces remain stationary during a turn. There are a lot of other possible configurations for this puzzle. I may come back and look at those another time, but we're starting with the default. Apparently the face configurations aren't always consistent on this puzzle from the factory, so be sure to check if yours is different. For example, the tutorial by Twisty Puzzling has a different configuration for the faces. Throughout this tutorial, I'll be assuming the color configuration that's on my puzzle. It also happens to match the color scheme in Zergosaur's tutorial. I'll put a link in the description that shows how to reconfigure the faces if you want. You can't necessarily switch the configuration on a fully scrambled puzzle without getting an invalid state though. In particular, these inner edge pieces around the edge of the white and yellow faces have fixed orbits, and so if you switch which pieces those are, you can get invalid states. Great, let's talk about how to approach this puzzle. Each step involves a particular type of piece, but solving the pieces within each piece type in a specific order can help make things a lot easier. This is a common feature of crazy type puzzles since the different kinds of faces make it easier to access some pieces than others, depending on where they're located. In general, I find it easiest to solve the least accessible pieces within a type first, and then move to the pieces that are easier to move around. This makes the setup moves a lot less complicated and helps make the whole process less error-prone. I have specific orders for each piece type that I'll show you when discussing the corresponding algorithms. Okay, so here's the solve order. I start with the inner edges, and then the middle edges, then the outer edges, then the inner corners, the outer corners, and then the middle corners. In terms of difficulty, I find these middle corners to be the hardest simply because the algorithms for that step are a bit long. I've included different options there though, so you can use whatever you're most comfortable with. And then these outer edge pieces can be somewhat difficult as well, just because you have to worry about orientation. And then the other steps are fairly straightforward. Let's jump right into it. The first step is to solve these inner edge pieces. The ones that are next to the white and yellow faces are locked into their orbits, and they can't exchange with the other inner edge pieces. So you start by rotating the white and yellow faces so that they're correctly placed. And then from there, you can take the commutator of a rotation on the red, orange, green, or blue faces with a rotation on either the yellow or white face. For those of you unfamiliar with the idea of a commutator, it just means do something else, undo the first thing, then undo the second thing. Commutators are a useful technique for isolating specific pieces that you want to manipulate. For example, say I want to cycle this piece, and then these two as well. Then I can put this one up here, rotate this, bring this one back down, then rotate this top again. And this makes a mess of the other pieces, but it moves around these inner edges in the way we want. To reverse that, I can start with the second move from before, then do the first one, then undo, like this. I can use a similar idea to cycle these three pieces or these three pieces. And the key idea is to just move a piece to the white or yellow face, rotate that face, to swap in the piece you want to bring back, then bring it down, then undo the rotation of the white or yellow face. This step is fairly easy, but I do find the most helpful ordering is to solve the edges on the red, orange, blue, and green faces first, and then finish up with the yellow and white faces. You can use the 3-cycle to pull edges off of the white and yellow faces into their solve positions. It's possible you may need to occasionally move a piece to the white or yellow faces before placing it in the solve position, or you can just use setup moves to handle that. As always, when finishing off, remember that you can solve something that looks like two swapped pieces by including a third piece of the same color as one of the other two in the 3-cycle. So I'll go ahead and solve these. Great, now let's talk about how to handle these middle edge pieces. The idea is basically the same, but instead of bringing things to the white and yellow sides to make a 3-cycle, you can bring them to the red and orange sides. There's also one additional restriction. When cycling edges, you want to avoid turning the white and yellow faces unless it's for a setup move. This helps you avoid any side effects on the inner edges. Basically, for this stage, we'll be looking at commutators of turns on the red or orange faces with turns on the blue or green faces. For example, if I want to move this piece here, this one here and this one here, I can alternate between these faces like this. And then as before, to reverse this, I just start on the other face. The solving order helps a bit more for this step. It may be helpful to move the piece you want to specific spaces on the red or orange faces before actually placing it. I start by solving the pieces that are next to the orange and red faces. For example, if you want to exchange this piece with pieces that are on the red face, you can do setup moves like this so that it's on the white face, and then easy to exchange with these pieces up here. And then you can undo the setup moves after you do the 3 cycle. Similarly, you can turn the piece in this position just down like this, and then exchange it with pieces on the orange or on the red and orange faces. Next, it's helpful to solve the remaining blue and green middle edge pieces. So that's these. The way to do this is to move the space you're interested in solving up to the red or orange face like this, and then cycle pieces up here to solve it. And then you just put it back. The rest of the ordering doesn't matter as much since specific setup moves aren't really necessary anymore. I'd like to solve the remaining yellow and white pieces and then the red and orange ones that are next to the white and yellow faces, and then the remaining red and orange pieces. Again, though, it doesn't really matter that much. Now let's talk about how to do these outer edges. These aren't quite as simple. Normally on a crazy type puzzle, the easiest way to isolate specific edges is by taking the commutator of 2 adjacent turns that exclude the inner edge pieces. The problem here is that the blue and green faces aren't next to each other, and they're the only ones that exclude all the inner pieces. You can actually still do the same thing by passing pieces you care about back and forth between the 2 faces. I'm not sure what the right term is for introducing this kind of move sequence, so for today we'll call it a handoff. The idea is to take commutators between operations that wouldn't overlap normally by handing off the pieces that you want to overlap. The only pieces affected by the algorithm will be the ones that participate in both turns. Here's how to use this idea to solve the outer edge pieces. You turn the top, hand off down to this level like this, turn the bottom, bring the pieces back to the top, undo the turn on the top, hand off pieces down to the bottom, undo the turn on the bottom, then bring the pieces back to the top. Aside from various side effects on the corners, this cycles these 3 edge pieces. This one comes here, this one comes here, and this one comes here. Just like with other commutators, you have leeway in how far you turn the blue and green faces. From this perspective, you'll always be including this piece, but you can include any of these 3, and then any of the 3 that can be swapped in for this one after the handoff. So in that case, it's all 3 of these after the handoff. And prior to the handoff, that's this piece, and this piece. You can do the mirror image of this algorithm as well, and then you can also do this facing any of the faces other than green and blue. So this works if you're facing white or red or yellow or orange, as long as you're passing pieces back and forth between blue and green. When solving the outer edge piece, it's important to note that the outer edge pieces can be flipped. So you have to make sure that they're oriented correctly when solving them. I take that into account when putting together the solve order. The easiest order to use when solving the outer edge pieces is to solve the ones that don't border on green and blue first. So that's these. To make sure they're oriented correctly, you can lift the spot where the piece you want to solve goes up to either the blue or green level. Really, you want whichever one has the piece you want to place, using a setup move in one direction or the other. And what you want to do is, with the setup move, orient the space that you want the edge to go into the same way as the piece is oriented on, if I'm looking, let's see. This is yellow, orange. That one's not actually available anywhere. Here it is. Okay, so yellow, red. If I want to orient this one correctly, I'll bring this up like this, use the 3-cycle to exchange these two with something else down here. And it'll be oriented properly like that when I bring it down. And then alternatively, if you want to, the 3-cycle can be used to directly exchange two of these pieces from the top layer and then one of these. But I find using a setup move to guarantee correct orientation a bit easier. So I'll go ahead and solve this center band of pieces. After that, I like to orient the blue and green edges so that they can be placed without having to worry about their orientation. So as with other ordering suggestions, you don't have to do it this way, but it can make things easier. For the blue and green edges, if they match the face that they're on, then they should be facing the same way. So like this piece. And then let's see if there's another example, and not like this piece. And then if an edge is opposite the face where it belongs, then it should be inverted. So like this one, and not like this one. And so for example, if an edge has blue on it and it's on the green face, then the blue part of the edge should not be on the same side as the green face. The way to reorient edges like this is to flip its orientation using setup moves like this, and then exchange it with a different piece that needs to be flipped into this place using the 3-cycle, and then undo the setup moves. So then both of them end up flipped. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so once I've oriented all the blue and green edges regardless of their actual placement, then I finish by using the 3-cycle to put them all into place. There is also a parity case to worry about here. In theory, you could address this by solving the outer edges to check for parity before solving the middle edges, and then solving them again afterward. It's not hard to resolve the parity case though, so I'm just going to show how to fix it instead. When you're finishing solving the outer edges, you may end up with just two edges. We'll say it's these two edges swapped. If that's the case, what you have to do is rotate a face a single turn, and then resolve the inner edges so that the face can now be oriented like that, and then finish solving the outer edges. You can move these inner edges together if you don't use the orange and red faces to do this. And so what you do is you just do commutators between the yellow and blue, or like white and blue, or white and green, etc. So it's easiest to turn either the blue or green face and then use one of these inner edge groups, so we'll say this one, on either the yellow or white face to move the inner edge pieces so that they correspond to the rotated face. And so what that would look like is like this. I'll say I put this here, up, down, and then I can go ahead and use a similar idea to cycle these. Great. So once that's done, that'll leave you with a state on the outer edges that can be solved using the 3-cycle algorithm for the outer edges. Fortunately, resolving parity usually doesn't change that many of the outer edges, so you'll still be very nearly finished with that stage. Great, so now let's talk about solving the corners. Just to recap, the way I'm showing here is to solve these inner corners first, then the outer corners, then these middle corner pieces. The inner and outer corners aren't terribly hard. These middle corner pieces are probably the most difficult, but that's just because the algorithm is a little long. So here's how to solve these inner corners. You can do up, up, down, down between faces other than white and yellow. So that's a commutator. And then take the commutator of that with turning the white or yellow face that only overlaps with one of the corners that you've moved. Depending on where you start, so if it's on the left or the right, the cycle's either this piece or this piece, with this piece and then one other one on the top of the face. So it's whichever one you move into this position when you turn this face. So here's an example of that. Say I want to cycle this one, and this one. I can go up, up, down, down, rotate this one into this position, and then start on the opposite side for the up, up, down, down to undo it, and then bring it back. And so I just cycled this one, and this one. With regards to solve order, it's easiest to start by solving everything other than the white and yellow faces, and then finishing off the white and yellow faces at the end. The way to exchange between the white and yellow faces is to turn the piece you want to exchange with the, turn the piece that you want to exchange with this layer, like this, and then turn the top so that you can exchange this piece and, say, these two. So we have a yellow here and whites here. You can use this technique earlier on in the stage as well to move some of the pieces you need to, or that you need to solve into position, or you can use some fancier setup moves. So for example, say that the piece that I want to put, let's say the piece that I want to put here is actually over here instead. I can put it on this top face first and then use the 3 cycle to get it down here, and then undo the setup move. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, issue with the time lapse there, but all right. So that's how you solve the inner corners. Unfortunately, that same kind of trick doesn't work for the outer or for the other layers of corners, but there still are good ways to go about it. For the outer corners, you can basically do whatever corner algorithms you want as long as you don't move the white and yellow faces, except maybe as setup moves. So there are a bunch of well-known ways to move around the corners on a 3x3, as long as you can use them without turning the white or yellow faces for anything other than setup moves. They'll work fine for this stage. I'll show a simple method here. Start by placing the corners without. I'll start by placing the corners without worrying about rotation, and you can permute the corners on a face like this. So you pull one out, and then move it over, or move the bottom layer over, put it back, and then move it over, put that one back, and then go back to the original spot, and put it back, and put that back. And so what that did is that cycled these 3. And you can do a similar thing to double swap the corners on this bottom face or permute any 3 of them. And if you're facing a white or yellow face, this algorithm will let you move the corners on the bottom face around without affecting any of the inner corners that you just solved. You can get all the corners into proper position without worrying about rotation by using the cycling algorithm while facing the white or yellow face. So you can, cycle these, rotate, cycle these, rotate, cycle these, however you want. If it helps to speed up the process, you can also use this 3 cycle. It's the commutator that the previous algorithm is based off of. Here's what that looks like. What you do is you just bring this one up, swap that in, bring it down, over, up, bring it back, down, back, and that cycles these 3. And although I don't know if that was the right direction. Anyway, so you can do this while facing either the white or the yellow face. So I'll go ahead and do that. Great. To rotate the corners in place, again, while facing a white or yellow face, you can do this move twice. 1, 2. Repeating in multiples of 2 until the corner here is oriented correctly. And then you can rotate to another corner on this bottom layer that you don't mind rotating, and keep doing this until these other pieces up here become solved again. This is necessary because corner rotations on a 3x3 have to be balanced out. So if you rotate one corner clockwise, you have to rotate a different corner 1 counterclockwise, or alternatively 2 clockwise. When rotating the corners on the double crazy cube, you can do something like rotating these 2 into place, and then rotating one of these however is needed to make that happen, and then turning the puzzle, doing the same thing here to solve these, then rotating one last time, and rotating all the corners on this bottom face into position. So I'll go ahead and do that. Great, that's how you solve the outer corners. Let's talk about these inner corners now. These are kind of hard to isolate. I was able to come up with one approach for cycling these, and then found another one online from Zergosaur's YouTube channel. I think the approach on the Twisty Puzzling channel is similar to the one from Zergosaur. I'll present that method and mine so you have options. Organizing which pieces you solve first helps a lot to keep things manageable for this step. I'll show these algorithms on the solved puzzle though, so you can see more clearly what's going on. Okay, so here's how Zergosaur's algorithm works. You want to be facing a red or orange face with a blue or green face on top. The idea is to pull this corner out one way and then put it back another. So you're going to pull it out of this layer, leaving all the other pieces the same, and then put it back a different way. There is a move sequence that'll do this, and it'll make a mess of a bunch of these pieces down here, but only change this corner when you're swapping, and then after the swaps, it'll just leave this middle corner piece changed. And that means you can take the commutator of that whole thing with the rotation of this top layer to get a 3 cycle of these inner corner pieces. Here's what that actually looks like. Okay, so this takes this piece to here, this piece to over here, and then this piece up to here. With this top layer turn, you can actually take it as far as you want in either direction, though. So really you get these 2 pieces, and then together with any one of these 3 that you want to include. And then you can also take the mirror image of this algorithm to get another variation. Here's the alternate approach that I figured out for this. In the previous step, I talked through some ways to permute the corners. And then what I do to get at these middle corner pieces is to do a 3 cycle of the corners, then switch the positioning of the centers relative to the corners, and then put the corners back with the repositioned centers. So the idea is to just permute some corners along the bottom here, move the center slice, undo the permutation, and then move the center slice back. So switching the positions of the centers changes which of these middle corner pieces get carried along with the corners. So the net effect of this process is to change just some middle corners. Commuting a change in centers with a corner permutation algorithm like this doesn't always result in a 3 cycle of inner corners, since each corner can potentially carry 3 different inner corners along with it. It does work some of the time, though. Here's the first example. I'm going to cycle these corners on the bottom, or actually no, these corners on the bottom using the algorithm from earlier, and then move the center like this, then undo the corner permutation, then undo the center move. For those of you familiar with PLL algorithms for 3x3, I'm just doing an A-perm. Some of the more efficient algorithms might work as a substitute. I know at least some do not. This version does. So on a 3x3, here's what that corner algorithm looks like. Let's see, let's get this oriented the same direction. All right, so basically you take this back corner up to here and then cycle, bring it up to here, and then cycle these 3 with a simple commutator. And then put it back. Anyway, so taking the commutator of that with the center slice looks like this. So the net result is moving this piece from here to here, this piece from here to here, this piece from here to here. What determines how this algorithm behaves is where the centers are. So to cycle these middle corner pieces, you want to have either the white or yellow face on top, and this way you're taking advantage of the difference between a partially fixed center and a fully fixed center. If you have one with a fully fixed center at the front at the beginning, it will cycle the pieces in the opposite direction that I showed. And then if you have one with a partially fixed center, then it'll go in the direction that I showed. So you can actually use this trick to permute the inner corners or the combined blocks of inner and middle corners if you need to at some point. To access just the inner corners, put the blue or green face on top. So that way you're looking at the difference between a partially fixed center and a completely free center. And then to access the inner and middle corners together, you put the red or orange face on top. The cycle directions in these cases will just depend on the position of whichever face has the larger fixed center position. You can also generalize this a little bit more to get double swaps instead if you want. I mentioned earlier that there's a way to do arbitrary even permutations of the bottom corners. You can take the commutator of that algorithm with the center slice and do something like that to the middle. Yeah, with the center slice to do something like that to the middle corner pieces. So, for example, if I'm doing this on the right like this, it'll affect the pieces on the right side of each of these corners. And I can do for example, a double swap of these two and then these two. By swapping these corners that way, turning the center, and then undoing the permutation of corners, then undoing the center turn. For double swaps, it doesn't really matter which center you start with, as long as the white or yellow remains on top. If you want to do a 3-cycle this way, though, if you start with the face with the larger fixed center at the front, the inner corners will cycle in the same direction as the way you move the corners at the beginning. So say I'm doing, I'm putting this one here, this one to here, this one to here, then these, so with the first cycle that you do, then when you do that commutator at the end, this one will go to here, this one will go to back here, and this one will come all the way back up to here. So I'll show that really quick, just so you can see it. So we're going to cycle this one, and this one. And so these are going to stay in place. Great. So at the beginning, we moved the corners, and then these, after we brought the corners back, these little these middle corner pieces stayed in place where they were. And there's the net result. And then so if you need to clean something up at some point, this trick also works to move the inner corner pieces. You just have to reorient so that you're working between the yellow, white, and red, orange. So same orientations as before, essentially. And then as before as well, mirror images of this algorithm work as well. Okay, let's talk about the solution order for this step. As I said earlier, I find it easiest to start by solving the least accessible pieces first. In that case, that's the pieces on the blue and green faces. You can't reposition them by turning those faces, and so they're just a little harder to move around. Once those are solved, it's easier to do setup moves with the other faces to set up the pieces that you want. Once you're ready to do some kind of cycle of those faces, you can reposition the center pieces so that they work for the algorithm you want to use. So for example, if I have things set up so that I want to cycle, we'll say these 3. Let's see, so it's these. I can bring the centers I need in like this without changing the relative position of any of these middle corners that I care about. When finishing off, remember that you can do what appears to be a single swap by including 2 pieces of the same color in a 3-cycle. I'll go ahead and solve this step. Great, that's the core solution method. As I mentioned earlier, it's really easy to make mistakes when solving this puzzle, so especially if it's your first time through, or if you get tired or just interrupted, remember to be patient with yourself if you need to backtrack. What I'm going to do now is show some algorithms that you can use to clean up mistakes without disrupting other solved pieces. I already showed you how to move around the inner and middle corners individually when discussing algorithms for these middle corners. Let's talk about the outer corners now. There's actually an easy double swap algorithm for corners that only changes the outer corner pieces. It's simple but a little long. All you do is take a commutator of single turns between one of the fully fixed faces and one of the other faces. Then repeat that 9 times total. There's probably a shorter algorithm, but I'm not aware of one yet. Since this is just a fallback for correcting mistakes, a long algorithm is good enough. So if you do up, up, down, down, over and over, it'll eventually swap. Well, I'll just show you. Great. It'll eventually swap these two and these two. So if you do up, down, or up, down, down, up, it'll swap, I think it's these two and then these two instead. And then you can also do the mirror image of that. Now here's a method for moving around these inner and middle edge pieces without affecting other stuff. The core idea here is to use an algorithm for rotating opposite centers on a 3x3. On a crazy cube, this will have some side effects on some of the edge pieces. The idea of the center rotation algorithm is to double swap the centers, rotate one of them, then double swap the centers back into place. And you can cancel out some of the moves in the middle to get the end algorithm. So here's what the double swap of centers would look like without the canceled moves. So yeah, and then what you would do is rotate this, double swap things back, and then rotate this again. But again, like I said, you can cancel out some moves in the middle of it. So here's what this looks like with the canceled moves. Okay, and so on a normal 3x3, that would just rotate these two centers by 180 degrees, but with this puzzle, the crazy centers have some additional side effects. So on the yellow or white faces around the middle here, it does nothing. But on the blue or green, it swaps these groups straight across like that. And then if I had oriented the puzzle like this instead when I was doing that, it would just swap these innermost edges and not these middle edges. You may remember that the innermost edges around the yellow and white faces are actually locked into their orbits. So you can fix those using the same idea, but there will be messy side effects. So if they both need a double turn, that's easy to do using the previous algorithm. And then you can also use the same idea to turn one clockwise and then the other counterclockwise. If you only need to turn one of them, or if they are turned in ways that don't mean you can do it simultaneously with this operation, then what you need to do is, here, let me undo that first. Then what you need to do is swap all the centers, so doing something like this. And then rotate the white face, or the yellow face, whichever one you're interested in, and then undo that. So I'm just going to put it back. Yeah, you rotate, and then you would undo. And then undo your rotation. And this will have a whole bunch of other side effects on the middle and inner edges and corners, but it will let you fix the inner edge pieces around the yellow or white face without quite as many side effects as starting over from the beginning. And then the key idea is just that you're basically taking a rotation from, say, this white face, so that would affect these, and then moving it to like one of these other ones, like say the red one. And then that'll have effects on these as well, but you'll be able to fix those using other tricks because these inner edge pieces, since they aren't bordering on the yellow one or on the yellow or white face, they aren't locked into place like these are. Okay, so if you have to clean up the outer edges, it may be easiest to just solve them and then fix the side effects, depending on where you're at in the solve. Here's a short double swap with more limited side effects, though. So you can swap these straight across. So if I'm facing a red or orange face, and then I have blue or green on top, I can just go like this. And what this does is it swaps these groups straight across, and the nice thing is that these groupings of middle and inner edges are not affected. So it's just these blocks of 3 that are affected by this. So hopefully that's enough to get you through the double crazy 3x3. As mass-produced puzzles go, this one is quite difficult, but it's certainly still doable. Good luck with the solve. Thank you.